All right, good evening, everyone. We'll get started today with lesson number 2 in our study of being members of one another, in our one another Christianity lessons. We're on lesson 2, serving one another. Today we'll do some light reading and have some hopefully robust discussion about the material and prepare for us to do the thought questions then on Sunday. I appreciate everybody's feedback and all the good things that everybody brought up in conversation on Sunday. I thought it was a really good class. It was exactly how it was hoping it would go, with everybody bringing contributions and ideals to challenge each other and be thought-provoking in these lessons. So I really wanted to appreciate that. I appreciate Luke sent me some stuff from online, some stuff to help organize some of these thoughts. It was good. I'm sorry I never got to respond to you, but it was good stuff. Before we get into the lesson, I did want to say, did anybody want to revisit getting clarity on kind of what we were talking about, Luke, with thought question number 1 on the last lesson? So that question was posed: is there a difference between being a member somewhere and being members of one another? And we came to the conclusion, and my stance was, I answered it a certain way, and here's why. Now, you could answer it differently than me and still be right, and some of you did. I hope I didn't communicate, though, that I was trying to die on the hill of you had to answer it like I did, because I certainly wasn't. So the question was, is there a difference being a member somewhere and being a members of one another? I said absolutely there is a difference, because we know that in practical reality, someone can place membership at a congregation, but maybe has not crossed that threshold yet of truly being a member of one another with everybody else and really serving each other. Some said, well, I answered it no. There is no difference, because when you place membership somewhere, that's what you're supposed to do. So you can answer it as, well, this is the way it's supposed to work, or you answer like I did of, this is the way it usually ends up happening. Does anybody need any clarifying thoughts on that? Are we kind of on the same page? Everybody good? Okay, just wanted to make sure that no one thought there was a rift or anything and two separate ideologies going on already. I think we're all on the same page there. So I appreciate that. We will read to begin before we discuss some of the things that we're going to get into later today. We're going to read Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28. And then we'll get into some discussion, and we'll refer back to those passages after we've had some time to kind of chew on it. I think that'll be conducive to us talking these things out more, as if we read them, discuss some things, and then while we've had time to think on these passages, then bring up some questions about it. So Matthew chapter 20, verses 20 through 28. Would anybody want to do 1 through 23 or 20 through 23? Nick, please.
The mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons and kneeled down, asking a favor of him. What is it you want? He asked. She said, grant that one of these two sons of yours be seated at your right hand and the other at your left in your kingdom. You don't know what you are asking, Jesus said to them. Can you drink the cup I'm going to drink? We can, he answered. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or my left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those whom they have been prepared by my Father.
All right, and thank you. 24 through 28. And volunteer. Luke, thank you.
And when the 10 heard it, they were indignant at the 2 brothers. But Jesus called them to him and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. It shall not be so among you, but whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be your slave. Even as the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many.
All right, thank you. The passage I'm sure you know well. There's Mark captures this conversation as well, with sometimes a little more detail added in. but I think it's very valuable to take a look at this and as always, revisit and try to glean more things from this. So while we're doing that, we'll read the text that the author wrote in our book, Matthew, in lesson chapter 2 on page 9, lesson number 2 on page 9, while you have some time to digest that passage. It says, the contrast in this passage is between the way the world thinks and how we are to act in the Lord's kingdom. In the kingdom of the world, people achieve greatness by dominating others. The best-selling books are titled Looking Out for Number One and Winning Through Intimidation Without Thinking of Others. The world's elite step on as many as necessary to make it to the top. That can even happen in religious circles. The scribes and Pharisees of the day had a problem with that, as in detailed in Matthew chapter 23 and Diotrephes in 3 John 9 through 11. But Jesus wants something different from us. He turns these carnal concepts upside down, as he does most things. And true greatness comes through serving others. Even elders in the Lord's church are not to dominate and rule by force and decree, but by example. 1 Peter 5, 2 through 3. All right, so we see this ideal here of the kingdom and what's coming. And to the credit, I guess, and defense, I will say, of the disciples, the apostles here that are trailing Jesus, what was their thought of when it comes into this kingdom? What's the mother of the two disciples? What is she kind of lobbying for here? What's she asking for to happen for her children?
Do you think she's still looking at a worldly kingdom, a kingdom in the world, not in heaven?
Okay, so good. Miss Carroll says she's looking at a worldly kingdom. I can, again, if you look at a physical interpretation of the Old Testament prophecies, I can understand why she thought that. Obviously, it was wrong, but I can understand that way of thinking. Nick, did you have something? Status, yes. I heard Michael describe this once before as like cabinet positions. You ever think about that? The president gives cabinet positions, and you're secretary of this, and you're the speaker of this, and department of whatever, the head of this. Well, and there's a lot of them, and the seeking status kind of screams what? Like, I'm here for whose benefit? Mine. Exactly. And in theory, even in a political appointee, a cabinet member, yes, there is a status with that, those lofty titles, right? But even in the spirit of that, they are supposed to even be servants, right? In theory, I know what actually happened, but in theory, right? If you were granted head over something, it is, well, you were taking a salary from everybody else's income tax, and you should be giving them a good service in return for that. So that is in theory how it works. Now, this culture of the day, and then you even see it infiltrating the church and the Sanhedrin there, that when someone has been appointed over something, that comes with an amount of status and amount of power, and that seemed like the way to get ahead in life. So you can imagine if you're a poor Jewish lady in a fishing village, and you've watched the Roman elites and the elites of the Sanhedrins and the publicans kind of keep your people under their thumb. Many, generations, you've been watching this for a long time, and you see that your sons have the Messiah has came into the world. I can't imagine that reality, but you see he's kind of taken a liking to your sons. Your sons seem to be good followers of him. I could understand, right? She said, look, there's two types of people in this world. There's those that get stepped on and those who do the stepping. Can you help make sure that my kids are in the comfortable position, right? Now, that quickly gets turned on its head, as the author says, when we analyze what Jesus had in mind and how true leadership, servant leadership, biblical leadership is supposed to work. I couldn't help but think of the writing here in the second paragraph where it says, without thinking of others, the world's elite step on as many as necessary to make it to the top. I was thinking about James and his writing to the church where he tells them, you are giving a lofty praise and you're giving preference to these wealthy people, but a lot of times it's the wealthy folks who are the ones who are oppressing you and doing a lot of bad things to you. So this is kind of backward thinking by you, right? And that's easy to fall into, right? I know, I myself, when I meet someone and I know they have done very well, business ventures, whatever the case may be, I think that's really cool. That is impressive. It's impressive that you've had that kind of character, that kind of know-how, and you've parlayed your skills into this position in life. I think that's an impressive thing. Now, what we have to be careful about is doing that and looking at that person within the realms of the church and saying, they're wealthy, they must have more value, right? They must be better than the next Christian. The white collar must be better than the blue collar, right? It is easy to fall into that, and the scripture kind of warns against that. And I also couldn't help but think, from working in town here, working at a financial institution, and I get the opportunity, you end up rubbing shoulders with people in the community whose family names have been influential throughout the development of the county and the city here. And for generations, they've been instrumental in the investments that's helped the community. They've also been wealthy along the way, as comes with that. And you get to rub shoulders with a lot of folks that grew up just like me, pretty regular, common people. And what you always hear is, no matter, from the one side you hear, hey, my father, whoever helped develop these communities and different families, they're such a great person. And then from the common folks that I rub shoulders with, that I probably identify a little bit more with, that always say, all those people have stepped on and done dirty a lot of people in this town to get where they are. And you hear, I hear both sides of the story all the time. I'm not here to advocate what side is truth and what actually happens in those things. I think probably be a fool's errand to try to unpack all that. It certainly wouldn't be the right time to try to unpack all of that here. But I'm sure you guys have seen that, and I see a lot of nods and smiles when I describe these relationships. That's what happens. I don't think small towns are probably any different than the rest of the world when it comes to that. So you can see why our thinking gets dominated into that, hey, let's get an elevated position. Let's get an elevated position so that I can be taken care of. The church, again, flips this thinking on its head. Why is it that you think it had to be so different? Miss Carol already highlighted that that this is not a physical kingdom. And in a physical kingdom, yes, it would require maybe a treasurer, maybe a department secretary of this, somebody over that, right? Just like you had in all the kingdoms you see, you had governors, you had different rulers. But when it is a spiritual kingdom, when we are a spiritual institution, especially practically, what are the issues with having things ran like that, or like how the Sanhedrin used to run?
God sees everyone equal.
Okay, God sees everyone equal, Miss Carol says. So it would be kind of strange, right, for God to say you're all equal, but then you'd appoint some folks that are enjoying things that other people don't get to a point, or get to enjoy. What about from a practical standpoint? Just think about this really practically. I'm a person off the street. I start attending services here, right? Tim finds out. He makes sure everybody in work groups is going to send me some cards. People are going to call me. They're going to ask me for Bible study, right? And you get to know me. I get to know you. You show me the scriptures. And I decide I want to be baptized. And I want to be a member of the church here. And I don't know anything. am I in position to be taken care of, or should I be taking care of people at that point? Should I be given any type of leadership roles? Am I going to be appointed to anything after I come up out of the waters and baptism? It's probably not going to work very well. What if I meant someone who is in a position of need? Now, this is kind of a rough analogy because you might say, well, that's red flags if somebody comes and gets baptized and then they say, hey, I have a need. I need you to help me with something. But for the sake of the example, bear with me on this. Who else is going to help them? Who else is going to help them unless we have an institution of people here to serve each other? Right? God put us all on earth. He did preordained before the foundation of the world, not in a common predestined way that is taught, but it was always predestined that there would be a church, right? And there would be a group of believers. So practically, how else could it work besides you are a person, you join the spiritual institution of the church, and you are joining an institution of folks who are ready to help when you have need. To me, that's the only way it could work, right? It's the only way where we could see and meet the needs of each other. If it did work the way maybe the apostles are envisioning it here, in their mother here, where you have these cabinet positions and these leadership positions and everything is departmentalized and regulated, and then a need arises for the people. Have any of you ever applied for any type of government grants or programs or anything like that? Or had to petition the government for anything? You guys ever buy a house? It's not like buying a loaf of bread, right? Takes a while. The wheels of government turn slow, as they say, and by design. That probably is not going to work. It's certainly not going to work very efficiently for the needs of another, right? If a person cannot drive any longer and they need a ride to church, we sit down, we divvy that out, we get that taken care of pretty quick. We don't have to fill out you don't require like a special form and a 90-day process with turnaround on that form and seeing 3 forms of ID and blood sample and all that, right? We don't have all that, right? So we can operate more efficiently. We can operate with a lot more care and personal touch involved when we operate as a group of people on the same plane who help one another. And in my mind, and that I see the infinite wisdom of God in this, that is the only way that can be executed. I am working on trying to find and identify and compress some historical things, some historical writings, maybe those who are close to the apostles or maybe one generation removed in the first few centuries, so that you can see the examples of, I know this is not inspired work, and I'm in no way trying to elevate it up to inspired work, but just so you can see how the people did take the command of the scriptures and live that out in the early centuries, and try to elevate one another with how they served one another. All right. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns about anything? Yes, sir, Mr. Hale?
As you were going through your analogy, my brain was kind of stewing. Just thinking about the blessing of having eldership. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
But if you've been to churches that don't have eldership, you definitely experience some hardships of situations like you're talking about. Someone comes in, they have a need, everyone's kind of trying to figure out what's going on. When you have men who are qualified by God's design and they've been put into place, they're able to examine people, ask questions, and get that gauge. They're protecting the flock by doing that. And now the flock can feel more confident in receiving and helping. And so there's a lot of pieces there when you have all things in place and a good eldership in place that I don't know, just help tie that all together for helping each other.
Certainly. Yeah, it really does. And the process still stays, if anything, it's even faster, right? You have the oversight to quickly identify, and you have the wisdom of people who have been there before and seen these things, and it can make these judgment calls. Yes. But Nick?
Talking about, how we like serve each other and stuff like that. If you look back at the first few chapters of Acts, when the church was being established, it's mentioned more than once that like these new Christians, like they were sharing everything.
Yes.
Make sure that everybody, had what they needed. Nobody went without. So, as much as we like to beat ourselves on the chest, be like, man, we want to be like the first century church. That's a good place to look and see how they did it.
Yeah.
Right there.
It really is. It's pretty challenging. It's one of those things where be careful. If you look too hard, you might read something that's maybe a little bit personally condemning, or at least wants you personally to get you, light a fire under you and get you going more. And again, some of these things aren't super prescriptive, right? There are good examples of what you can do in a situation. Their situation doesn't always mimic ours, right? The church in Acts probably 2-6 is a lot of transient people, a lot of people in Jerusalem who don't live there. They traveled through Pentecost. They were enlightened in a way they had never been enlightened before about the kingdom being here, and they're baptized and they're new believers, so they're sticking around, right? I don't see how you pull that off unless you do have folks who are deeply determined to take care of one another, right? To say, these are new believers just like I'm a new believer. I'll make sure they get to stay. I'm going to make sure they get to learn. They're going to get to eat. They're going to get to know me. They're going to know that they have a place here with me and my family. And I'm sure that's going to reciprocate, right? Again, if this wasn't a kingdom, an earthly institution, and you have all these transient people here joining a new cause, I'm sure that could get pretty muddy pretty quickly with a physical government trying to work its way through that and get people what they need. Another question I had for the group is, if we get the pleasure of looking at this in hindsight, of the apostles, lobbying for a position, right, of power and of comfort, luxury, probably. Again, I look at it, when I look at these Bible stories, I try not to say, oh, look at that foolish person that said this or thought this or did this. I always try to think, well, they're human beings just like me. They're made of flesh like me. How easy is it to get into that position and think like that, right? Try that exercise. If you read about the Israelites complaining, or you read about the apostles doing something that they shouldn't be doing, the nation of Israel falling away and coming back, just put yourself in their shoes and think about maybe how easy it is to get there. And I think it's an interesting study of policing yourself and not saying, well, I would never do that, instead of saying, well, how did they get there? How do I make sure I don't go down that path? Because it's easier to get there than you think. So again, you're in the position of folks that grew up without much their whole lives, and they say, how do I elevate my family, right? How do I make sure my children are elevated? What question, we have the gift of hindsight, so what question do you think maybe they should have been asking the apostles about themselves or their families? If you wanted to be considered great in the kingdom, what does the Bible say really you would do to get there?
You ask, what can I do for you?
There you go. Read it. Say it again.
You ask, what can I do for you?
What can I do for you? Shortly thereafter, right, Jesus is washing their feet and he's showing them. So wouldn't the better question have been, how can you use me in your kingdom? Which one of your people, what group of your people would you have me take care of? What would be my role in taking care of your people? Now that effectively is the same. If you're going to trust somebody with a big undertaking in the church, you may have a leadership type of title, but it's a servant role. It is always a servant role. If you look at just the name, deacon, right? Elder, Bible class teacher, whoever. Are you going to say, hey, who's really smart? Or who is of influence in the community, and end it right there? That's not really going to get you very far. You're not going to be conducive to a healthy church. When you are appointing these positions in the church, in the kingdom of the Lord, it's always someone who you said there is a need. So who is going to execute those needs? Who is going to take care of the folks in need? If you ever look at that upside down leadership platform and how that relationship works, and you see, well, the church is going to have a preacher, is going to have a minister. Is he serving or is he getting served? Is he spending his weeks putting together a lesson? You know, it may take 40 minutes or whatever to deliver a lesson, but how long does it take to put one together? How long does it take to meet and study with folks to identify what needs preached on? And the Bible studies needed to the lost, to evangelize. The Bible studies needed for these questions that happen to come up offline. Elders dealing with situations, private situations within the congregation. Are they saying, hey, when you have a private problem amongst yourselves, we want you to come to us so that you can serve us? That's not how the relationship works. Right, Jeff and Ron don't announce, hey, on Thursday at 5 o'clock, we're coming, or we're going to be at the building in case you want to come do some nice stuff for us. Now, I'm sure it would be great if we wanted to do that. But what they are volunteering is, hey, we are here to help you. And we are here to facilitate that to you. And that's a brave undertaking. And they say that knowing full well, hey, when we open that door and we say you come in at 5 and bring your needs to us, they're volunteering themselves that, hey, somebody is probably going to come and ask something of us or bring us a problem that maybe we can facilitate fixing. And that's a very selfless and a servant type of task. But those are the tasks in the way that they are laid out in the kingdom. Thought question for you guys: is the servanthood of a saint, is that set aside just for those with a title or a leadership position? What do you guys think? Probably not. Any reason why you think that may not work or may not be the most practicable, or why that is not what the Lord had in mind?
Well, we've only got a few, we'll say, title positions in the church. We've got a lot more members. So those few can't cover it all, and it takes all of us to get it done.
Exactly. Is that what you were going to say, Paul? Yeah, just the numbers relationship by itself doesn't really work, right? How many deacons you guys have at your last meeting? Somewhere between 7 and 40, right? About that. It's probably in between there, right?
18 of 19.
18 of 19, there you go. I think that's a good number. But when you compare it to 167, that becomes difficult. And we've emphasized this, right, in the congregation. The first few lessons here is that it's everybody's responsibility, because we said we are all given gifts by God, and we are all selected to be in His kingdom because we've chosen to be. We've answered that call. If only those who wear a title get to serve each other, then what's that mean for everybody else? Then we're right back to kind of just being in the pew, right? And I could go down a whole other rabbit hole of the fulfillment that comes with being a servant to each other, and how good that is actually for the person being served, and the type of impact it can have on your life. I wanted to revisit something. I find this interesting to continue to compare the type of earthly kingdom versus spiritual kingdom, on how we appoint folks, how we serve in one kingdom versus another. Again, as we were talking about the disciples' mother there asking for this role so her children could be taken care of. And we're looking at all the problems that arise when things are in a physical appointing type of earthly kingdom way. And there's a clip, I don't know if any of you guys ever watched, but there's a clip between, and this is probably from like the late 1970s, of, anybody remember the Phil Donahue show, the talk show used to be on? So Phil Donahue, you guys, some of you remember, he is interviewing a man named Milton Friedman, who was a famous economist, and in that time, the country was facing a lot of the kind of the stuff it was facing now with hyperinflation and things, and Friedman was a forward thinker, and he brought a new type of thought process, and he said, we have to have a free market, etc., to free us from these burdens. And Donahue's thinking was very much, hey, it just makes a couple hundred people rich and the rest of the people suffer. We should get a new system. And they're having this friendly debate, very cordial, and Friedman made the point, look, in the societies that thrive the best, they have capitalism and a free market. It's just undisputed truth. And Donahue's rebuttal was, well, that seems to reward those who know how to game the system, and it doesn't reward virtue. Saying is that, well, if we had a different, more of a socialist economic platform, maybe everybody could be elevated, and it wouldn't just be those who know how to game our capitalist system who make it. So he says, well, you're rewarding those who know how to game the system and not virtuous people. As Friedman makes a great counterpoint, he said, now who is it then that you know that just rewards virtue? Is the communist commissar reward virtue? Do you think Russia rewards virtue? Or China? Do you think they reward virtue? He said, even spin it on its head. If you'll excuse me, do you think the President of the United States awards virtue? Do you think he appoints people to his cabinet based on the virtue of the people, or whether or not they politically agree with him? Every time you get an appointee, it's because the person in power says they align with my beliefs, and or they will do my bidding. They will do what I've asked them to do. Now, you'll get political talk about they're a great person and all that. It's always odd, right? Every single person that's put up for office is just this angel. Each time the new one gets nominated, and then the person nominating them just talks about how great they are. Man, you guys never run out of these fantastic people. But it highlighted that so very clearly for me. If the church was to run like a physical institution, where it is simply a tap on the shoulder and you get promoted and then you get promoted to this, what do human beings turn that into? They turn it into a political game. But if our leadership is servant leaders, and we are all here truly to serve one another, then the people going after that role are doing it just for the right cause. I'm here to help other people. I'm not here for clout. I'm not here for the title. I'm not here to be taken care of. I'm here to take care of other people because it is right and because it is good. So again, this is another example of the Lord's wisdom being superior to our wisdom and how this function is set up.
Johnny,
Yes, sir.
in today's society is saying it's not what you do, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
That's how you get up.
Sure. And is there truth in that?
No.
You don't think so? You don't think? I have a lot of other heads shaking the other way. You're not from Somerset, are you? Now, in the church, I will say it's probably a mix of both. Good people, the cream will rise to the top. In a small town, small community, certainly helps who you know. I always joke with people all the time when I meet someone new at work and I introduce myself and I say, hi, I'm Johnny Lunsford, I work for Southern, people, And if I say, hi, I'm Michael Ray's brother-in-law, they say, hey, good to meet you. Do you need your car washed or anything? No, there is a mindset kind of both ways, who you know, who can take care of you. We were sitting around at work the other day and everybody was talking about who they were related to that was in leadership somewhere within our organization and how they got their job. And I was like, well, I can't, if any of you think I earned the job I got, you're wrong. But sometimes it can work that way. In the church, obviously, I feel like we are many times protected and insulated from that, at least by design. I'm not saying in every congregation, everywhere, that there's never been someone appointed to something somewhere that shouldn't have been. Yeah, I can't vouch for what everybody's done everywhere, but we know by design, right? We know how it's supposed to work by design. But thank you for bringing that up. It does certainly speak to, and I think this is kind of where you were going, maybe you correct me if I'm wrong, is that folks will fall into that mindset and they think like, well, if I cozy up next to the right people, they'll take care of me. And I'll get elevated into the position that I need to be. Whereas our thinking as Christians needs to be, how can I take care of other people? How can I elevate them? All right.
I look at how
Yes.
Christ's behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. He
And-
wasn't elevated, was he? He was
No.
down.
And had every right to be.
Yeah.
Had every right to be. And that's our ultimate example of someone that deserved all the titles and accolades. Not deserved, already had, right? Already was God in flesh, that was the great I am, and didn't enjoy any of the things that come along with that when he was in earthly
So
form.
he was aware of how humans acted.
Yes.
Right, yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So the characteristics of a servant for class discussion you see in the margin, in the right-hand margin. And put others' needs first. We've talked about that at length. This should not be a what's in it for me question, but what do they need question. The second point I wanted to touch on, because I think this is probably something that gives people a little pause about, okay, if I'm signing up for this one another Christianity thing, how much do I gotta give, or what is going to be required of me? It says, be prepared to be inconvenienced. Opportunities to serve are often overlooked and undone because they're usually not convenient. Helping others takes time and effort. Anything that's worthwhile truly does. And he gives you the example of the Good Samaritan as well, right? Who we know who went out of his way, diverted his path, took care of the man that was beaten, took him to an inn, paid for things, said, I'll return if he has more needs. Obviously, right, he diverted his time and schedule. So, to make this practical for today, the chances of you finding one of us penniless and half dead on the side of the road, I hope is pretty small. There are still going to be needs identified that you can help with, though. Our lives look a bit different or much different now. But one thing I think, because we have more abundance, is we also a lot of times seem like we have less time. And that prepared to be inconvenienced. More than ever, you see people who have, and in the field I work in, you definitely become aware of this. A lot of people have more than one job, or they have a full-time career, and it's a good career, but they also own a string of apartment complexes or something else. You have more than one income stream, and that takes time, right? Nothing wrong with that, but it is a time commitment, right? There's an additional time commitment. Then you throw in your obligation. You have an absolute obligation to rear your children and to raise them. And I think all of us want good lives for our children and to do good things for them. So that schedule starts to fill up quickly. And I think sometimes that can be the biggest factor holding people back from a lot of times in today's day, I find that if you're helping a brother or sister in Christ, someone that attends where you attend, the financial burden is probably not going to be too great. And the time commitment may not be massive, but it always seems like it's just tough to fit in. It's tough to fit exactly in your schedule, exactly what they need. Your time is much of the time already spoken for, and it becomes difficult to work in those needs. And then obviously the other thing is, because you are so busy, we talk about this, right? We kind of have a responsibility. Nick, I gave you, goes back to the really hard question that you had. We had that responsibility as people to reach out and look for a need. We have to create one and manufacture one, but we look for a need. And we also have that responsibility of folks, if we are in need, to tell someone who can help us if they don't know, right? I think, if I'm being honest with myself, there have been times that I curb how hard I'm looking for opportunities to help other people because I know I'm already pretty busy. And that's where that inconvenience factor gets into play. And there just needs to be a point, I think, where we analyze how we organize our lives. Do we organize our lives with margin in them so that we can do good things for others that need to be done? And I know there's difficulties. Sometimes people live very far away from the church building they attend at, and then they're going to be far from the other members. And there's some logistical challenges there as well. But I think organizing your life in a way with margin in it, because taking care of yourself, there are things you need to do that take care of yourself that are important. We will, believe it or not, somehow, some way in our me focused society, you will forget that if you don't at least take some time to take care of yourself and make sure you're good and do your studies and things that you need to do. And then you certainly get to a point where you can be lacking in how you help each other because you didn't build margin in your life. Luke, did you have something?
Yeah, they used to heard it say, your responsibility is your response according to your ability. It was kind of a play on words, if you will. Well, how can I play a part in serving here? How am I able to? And if I'm able to, then I can do that. That's my responsibility in this situation. The other thing I think really hard to overcome, and I know for myself, has been how we tend to elevate what others are doing in certain situations, and we say, I can't serve like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just gonna not do anything. And we tend to forget that the really little things, the really simple serving things go a really, really far away, a really long way. And sometimes that's as simple as going to a brother who looks like they've been discouraged and saying, let's grab lunch.
Yeah.
Or let's just sit down and talk. Let's go play some pickleball. Something. I was thinking of you on that one. And sometimes that's serving others in and of itself.
Yeah.
Knowing that we are being encouraged in those ways.
Yeah, a lot of these things that you're going to identify as your need in doing, it's not monumental. It's probably not stuff like when we bring these extra biblical writings in and we talk about examples of the first century church and how they helped each, like the things you can identify to do probably won't warrant maybe being written about and preserved for human history. That's okay. It's still a good thing. And if you look for these good and small opportunities, you kind of find it will if there's a bigger need, it will materialize, and your role in it will materialize as well. We don't need to be searching for someone literally half beaten and half dead in the ditch like the Good Samaritan. If you see that, obviously we have a need, but it's not always going to be a monumental task. Like Luke said, just because you may not be fit for a monumental task doesn't mean you're not fit to do something at all. So that was very good. I appreciate you bringing that out. The other thing, I have this policy I don't know, it's not policy, but it's something in my life I exercise. And I almost see no one do it, and the more I see them not do it, the more it makes me want to keep doing it. I almost have a automatic no answer if someone asks me to do something on the weekend. Not, again, you spent 3 weeks talking about helping each other out. I do that so that it usually, I can be free for all the stuff that falls off the plate for myself, for my family, and if someone asks and does have an immediate need, I have that time built in. Okay, I don't have anything planned, I can go take care of that. But most of the time, if I talk to my friends, or if I invited somebody to come hang out with me this weekend, I know most of my friends are going to say no because they already have it booked. And if I say next weekend, that's booked too. And kids' activities and everything else, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe probably have to be a month ahead before I can get on anybody's calendar. I'm really glad that I do that. Again, I'm not saying you have to do that. I'm not here to make a law that God didn't make. I'm not saying that at all. But I very much enjoy building that into my life so that I can help others, that I can help the immediate needs of the family, because busyness is the biggest derailment, I think, in our lives of what makes us capable to help each other out. So thank you guys all for your contributions. Again, we're going to have the questions from next week. They're going to read, like I said, they're going to read pretty easy and pretty obvious, so put some thought into these answers. I'm interested to see what you guys can extract and bring out and wow us all with your answers. So thank you so much for your contribution.